December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. The acrid smoke still rises from twisted steel and burning oil, casting long shadows across the Hawaiian morning. In the basement of the 14th Naval District headquarters, Commander Joseph Rochefort stands motionless at his desk, staring through thick glasses at intercepts that arrived too late. The smell of cigarettes and coffee mingles with something else, the bitter taste of failure. Around him, the windowless room they call the dungeon hums with desperate activity. IBM machines click and whir, processing punch cards that might have saved 2,400 American lives if only they'd been decoded 12 hours earlier. The basement feels like a tomb. Cramped tables overflow with coded Japanese messages, their secrets still locked away behind mathematical walls that seemed impossible to break. Rochefort adjusts his unconventional smoking jacket over his naval uniform, a quirk that normally draws bemused looks from visiting officers. Today, no one notices. Everyone understands the weight pressing down on this soft-spoken man who dedicated his career to reading the enemy's mind, and failed when it mattered most. "We failed to forecast the attack," he'll say later, his voice carrying the burden of those words like stones. "I failed." But Joseph Rochefort doesn't know that this moment of crushing defeat will birth the most brilliant intelligence operation in naval history. He doesn't know that 6 months from now, his team of eccentric codebreakers will orchestrate a deception so audacious it will lure the entire Japanese fleet into a trap. He doesn't know that their basement dungeon will become the secret weapon that turns the tide of the Pacific War. Right now, all he knows is guilt. The Japanese naval code JN-25 sits before him like a mathematical fortress. 50,000 code groups. 50,000 ways to say, attack Pearl Harbor, or destroy the American fleet, or tomorrow we strike. By December 7th, Rochefort's team had cracked barely 2,000 of them, a pathetic 4% that couldn't reveal Japan's deadliest secret. Lieutenant Commander Thomas Dyer, the unit's lead cryptanalyst, looks up from his desk where a hand-drawn sign reads, "You don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps a hell of a lot." Behind his wire-rimmed glasses, his eyes hold the same haunted expression as his commander's. This short, stubborn man with the white goatee has dedicated his life to solving impossible puzzles. Today, the puzzle solved itself with bombs and blood. The intercepts keep flowing in, each message a taunt from Admiral Yamamoto's victorious fleet. But something else flows with them, a desperate, burning determination that will transform this basement of misfits into America's most lethal weapon. How do you redeem yourself from the worst intelligence failure in American history? How do you turn devastating defeat into impossible victory? The answer lies hidden in those remaining 48,000 code groups and in the brilliant, obsessive minds about to crack them. The Pacific Ocean becomes Japan's highway to conquest. Within weeks of Pearl Harbor, the rising sun flag flies over Wake Island, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the Dutch East Indies. Each victory arrives with the same terrifying efficiency. Japanese forces appear where least expected, strike with overwhelming force, then vanish back into the vast Pacific before Allied commanders even understand what hit them. In the basement at Pearl Harbor, Rochefort's team works with desperate intensity. The dungeon now operates on 24-hour shifts, with cryptanalysts stumbling between their desks like zombies sustained by benzodrine tablets and black coffee. Thomas Dyer routinely works 42-hour stretches, his stubborn nature refusing to let him rest, while American boys die in places whose names he can barely pronounce. "I figured there were people out there getting shot at," Dyer explains to anyone questioning his health. "If it should happen that it inflicts some injury on my health in the long run, so what?" The work itself borders on madness. JN-25 isn't just a code. It's a mathematical maze designed by paranoid Japanese cryptographers who assumed their system was unbreakable. Every message begins with a 5-digit code from a book containing 30,000 common Japanese naval terms. Then each code group gets enciphered again using a separate keybook with 50,000 random number combinations. It's like solving a crossword puzzle written in a foreign language, then encrypted with a second puzzle, then transmitted with inevitable radio static that scrambles random pieces. Agnes Meyer Driscoll, the brilliant woman they call the First Lady of Naval Cryptology, moves between the machines like a general surveying a battlefield. At 52, she's already broken more enemy codes than most men attempt in their entire careers. Her mathematical mind sees patterns where others see chaos, connections where others see randomness. Any man-made code can be broken by a woman, she declares with quiet confidence that inspires the exhausted team around her. But breaking codes requires more than mathematics. It demands understanding the enemy's soul. Rochefort spent 2 years in Japan, learning not just the language, but the culture. He knows how Japanese naval officers think, how they phrase orders, how their formal military language reveals tactical intentions. When a partially decoded message mentions AF, he doesn't just see 2 letters. He sees the operational mindset of Admiral Yamamoto planning his next devastating strike. The problem is location. AF appears in dozens of intercepts throughout March and April 1942. Intelligence estimates suggest it's the target for Japan's next major offensive, but AF could be anywhere in the vast Pacific. Australia? Hawaii itself? The Aleutian Islands? Without knowing where Yamamoto plans to strike, the Americans remain blind, exactly as they were before Pearl Harbor. Washington doesn't trust Rochefort's hunches. The bureaucrats in naval intelligence prefer their intelligence safe and sanitized, delivered through proper channels by officers who wear regulation uniforms and follow protocol. They eye Rochefort's smoking jacket and Dyer's around-the-clock Benzedrine habits with deep suspicion. How can these basement eccentrics possibly outthink the Imperial Japanese Navy? But Rochefort's team isn't thinking like bureaucrats. They're thinking like hunters. Every night, more intercepts arrive. Yamamoto's forces are moving, concentrating somewhere in the Central Pacific. The radio traffic increases daily, suggesting something massive approaches. Timestamps reveal coordination between multiple fleet units. Fuel calculations hint at extended operations far from Japanese bases. The pattern builds like storm clouds on the horizon. The early messages about Coral Sea, the early messages about Midway, were perfectly capable of being read in a totally different way than the correct way, Dyer later explains. Knowledge of the character of the Japanese and this, that, and the other enabled him to get the right meaning. That knowledge comes at a price. The basement team barely sleeps, barely eats, barely speaks to their families. Their world shrinks to punch cards and probability tables, to fragments of intercepted conversations between Japanese admirals plotting America's destruction. The fluorescent lights never dim. The IBM machines never stop clicking. The coffee pot never empties. Rochefort begins to suspect AF means Midway Atoll, 2 tiny islands 1,300 miles northwest of Pearl Harbor. It makes perfect sense as Yamamoto's next target. Midway sits astride Japan's approach to the Hawaiian Islands, close enough to support an invasion, but isolated enough to destroy without massive casualties. Take Midway, and Yamamoto forces the American fleet into open battle, where his superior numbers can annihilate what remains of the Pacific Fleet. But suspicion isn't proof. Washington demands certainty. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commanding the Pacific Fleet, can't deploy his precious aircraft carriers based on hunches from basement code breakers. The American fleet is already outnumbered 3-1. One wrong guess, one misplaced carrier group, and Japan wins the Pacific War permanently. The pressure builds like steam in a boiler. Every decoded fragment suggests Yamamoto's offensive grows closer. Radio intercepts indicate the Japanese fleet will strike AF in early June, less than 6 weeks away. But without absolute confirmation of the target, Nimitz remains blind. Then Rochefort conceives the most audacious intelligence deception in naval history. What if they could make the Japanese tell them what AF means? May 19th, 1942. The basement at Pearl Harbor. Rochefort removes his wire-rimmed glasses and rubs his tired eyes. Around him, the dungeon buzzes with controlled chaos, IBM machines sorting punch cards, cryptanalysts bent over worksheets covered in 5-digit number groups, radio operators transcribing the latest intercepts from Japanese naval headquarters. But tonight feels different. Tonight, they're about to execute the most brilliant deception in intelligence history. Here's what we're going to do, Rochefort announces to his assembled team, his normally soft voice carrying an edge of barely contained excitement. We're going to make the Japanese tell us what AF means. Thomas Dyer looks up from his desk, his white goatee catching the harsh fluorescent light. After weeks of 24-hour shifts sustained by Benzedrine and stubborn determination, his eyes still sparkle with the intellectual thrill of solving impossible puzzles. How exactly do we accomplish that miracle, Commander? Rochefort's plan is audacious in its simplicity. The Americans know the Japanese have broken their lower-level administrative codes, the same way Station HYPO breaks Japanese messages. What if they could plant false intelligence in one of those compromised channels? What if they could trick Japan into revealing the meaning of AF by making them comment on it? Midway's going to have a water shortage, Rochefort declares with a slight smile. The room falls silent except for the steady clicking of IBM machines. Agnes Driscoll raises an eyebrow. A water shortage, Commander? A completely fictional water shortage, Rochefort continues, his voice gaining momentum. We'll have Midway transmit an uncoded message to Pearl Harbor reporting problems with their freshwater distillation system. We'll use a code we know the Japanese have broken. If AF really means Midway, the Japanese will report this intelligence to their fleet commanders. Dyer's eyes widen behind his glasses. The mathematics of the deception are beautiful, elegant, simple, undetectable. And when they report it, they'll have to use AF in their message, Rochefort finishes, along with some reference to water problems. We'll have absolute confirmation. But the plan requires perfect execution. The fake message must seem authentic without being too obvious. It must reach Japanese intelligence without appearing to be bait. Most importantly, it must arrive in time to confirm Yamamoto's target before his fleet disappears into radio silence. Lieutenant Commander Joseph Finnegan coordinates the deception. A submarine carries the coded instructions to Midway Atoll, where the base commander receives orders that must seem routine to Japanese listeners, but desperate enough to warrant immediate transmission to Pearl Harbor. On May 20th, Midway transmits its fabricated emergency. Freshwater distillation system breakdown. Require immediate supply of fresh water. The message goes out on a frequency the Americans know Japanese radio operators monitor. To any eavesdropper, it sounds like standard military logistics, this kind of mundane communication that fills the airways between Pacific bases. Nothing suggests the desperate intelligence operation behind those simple words. Now comes the waiting. In the basement, Rochefort's team maintains their normal routine while listening for Japanese responses. The IBM machines continue clicking through intercepted messages. Cryptanalysts bend over their worksheets, decoding fragments of Japanese naval communications. The coffee pot percolates endlessly. Everything appears normal except for the electric tension running through every person in the room. Hours pass, then a full day. Dyer begins to worry their deception was too subtle. Perhaps Japanese intelligence dismissed the water shortage as unimportant. Perhaps they've grown suspicious of American communications. Perhaps AF doesn't mean Midway after all, and Rochefort's hunch will prove as catastrophically wrong as their Pearl Harbor predictions. Then, on May 22nd, the miracle arrives. Radio operators intercept a Japanese message transmitted from naval headquarters to fleet commanders throughout the Pacific. The encoded text flows across the basement's monitoring stations like any other enemy communication, but this one carries the proof Rochefort desperately needs. The decoding process takes hours. 5-digit code groups must be matched against captured Japanese codebooks. Then the resulting text must be deciphered using the secondary encryption key. Each step offers opportunities for error, misinterpretation, or incomplete recovery. But as the message takes shape, the basement erupts in barely contained excitement. AF is short of water. 4 words that change everything. The Japanese have taken the bait completely. Their intelligence services dutifully reported Midway's water shortage to fleet commanders, using the same AF designation that appears in Yamamoto's operational plans. The confirmation is absolute. AF means Midway Atoll. Dyer later describes the moment of breakthrough as emotional ecstasy. The exhilaration was almost in sexual terms, he recalls. Physiologically, it's not the same, but the emotional feeling is pretty much the same. Breaking the code feels like opening an impenetrable door, like solving a puzzle that encompasses the entire Pacific War. But euphoria quickly transforms into urgent action. With AF confirmed as Midway, every subsequent Japanese message becomes a piece of Yamamoto's battle plan. The basement team works with renewed intensity, decoding fleet movements, ship assignments, timing estimates, and tactical objectives. The picture emerges piece by piece, the largest naval operation in Japanese history, designed to annihilate what remains of the American Pacific Fleet. Yamamoto plans to attack Midway on June 4th, with 4 aircraft carriers supported by battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. The diversionary assault on the Aleutian Islands will draw American attention north, while the Izumo main force approaches Midway from the west. Once the atoll falls, Yamamoto expects Admiral Nimitz to rush his carriers into a desperate rescue attempt, where the waiting Japanese fleet will destroy them in decisive battle. It's a brilliant plan that should guarantee Japanese victory. Except now the Americans know every detail. Rochefort personally briefs Admiral Nimitz on the intelligence breakthrough. The Pacific Fleet commander listens with growing amazement as his basement cryptographers outline enemy intentions with mathematical precision. Ship positions, attack timing, force composition, tactical objectives. It's as if Yamamoto himself walked into Nimitz's office and handed over his battle plans. "How confident are you in this intelligence?" Nimitz asks. Rochefort doesn't hesitate. "Absolutely confident, Admiral. They're coming to Midway on June 4th. The decision transforms from intelligence gathering to strategic deployment. Instead of responding to Japanese attacks, Nimitz can position his forces for ambush. Instead of fighting blind, American pilots will know exactly where to find enemy carriers. Instead of desperately defending scattered positions, the Pacific Fleet can concentrate overwhelming force at the point of Japanese attack. The water shortage deception becomes the fulcrum that tips the entire Pacific War. But success depends on maintaining absolute secrecy. If the Japanese discover their codes have been broken, they'll change their entire communication system overnight. Yamamoto will modify his battle plans. The element of surprise will shift back to Japan. The opportunity for decisive victory will evaporate like morning fog over Pearl Harbor. In the basement, Rochefort's team continues their normal routine, decoding Japanese messages while pretending they haven't just orchestrated the greatest intelligence coup in naval history. The coffee pot percolates. The IBM machines click steadily. The fluorescent lights cast their harsh shadows across worksheets covered with enemy secrets. Everything appears normal. except for the quiet satisfaction in Joseph Rochefort's eyes as he adjusts his smoking jacket and prepares to watch Yamamoto's fleet sail into the perfect trap. June 4th, 1942. 6:37 a.m. Pacific Time. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey banks his SBD Dauntless dive bomber through scattered clouds 14,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. Below him, 4 Japanese aircraft carriers steam in perfect formation: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. Their flight decks crowded with fueled aircraft preparing for the second wave against Midway Atoll. McCluskey doesn't know that 1,300 miles southeast, in a windowless basement at Pearl Harbor, Joseph Rochefort sits quietly at his desk, monitoring radio intercepts that will soon announce the most decisive naval victory in American history. The soft-spoken cryptographer, who felt crushing guilt over Pearl Harbor, is about to witness his redemption written in fire and smoke across the Pacific sky. The dive bombers plunge from the sun. In 5 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers will be burning wrecks. By evening, all 4 will rest on the ocean floor, along with 248 aircraft and Japan's most experienced naval pilots. Admiral Yamamoto's decisive battle becomes decisive for America. The victory transforms everything. Japan's advance across the Pacific stops permanently. The myth of Japanese naval invincibility dies in the flames of burning carriers. Most importantly, the balance of power in the Pacific shifts to America for the remainder of the war. But the real victory belongs to the eccentric geniuses in Pearl Harbor's basement. Thomas Dyer finally allows himself to sleep more than 3 hours per night, though he'll never fully recover from those months of benzodrine-fueled marathon sessions. Without any false modesty, he later reflects, in cryptanalysis only, I was number 1. The Battle of Midway proves his boast absolutely correct. Agnes Driscoll continues breaking Japanese codes throughout the war, shattering the careers of enemy cryptographers who assumed their systems were unbreakable. Her mathematical brilliance saves countless American lives and shortens the Pacific War by years. The First Lady of Naval Cryptology proves that genius recognizes no gender boundaries. Joseph Rochefort receives no immediate recognition for orchestrating the intelligence coup that made Midway possible. Bureaucratic rivals in Washington resent his unconventional methods and independent thinking. They deny him the Distinguished Service Medal he clearly earned, forcing him into obscurity while lesser men claim credit for his achievements. Justice arrives decades too late. In 1986, 10 years after Rochefort's death, the Navy finally awards him the Distinguished Service Medal posthumously. Admiral Max Showers, who worked under Rochefort during the war, leads the campaign for recognition. Joe Rochefort and his team did more to win the Pacific War than any other intelligence unit in American history, Showers declares at the ceremony. The legacy extends far beyond World War II. Modern intelligence services still study the AF water shortage deception as a masterclass in strategic misdirection. The techniques developed in Station HYPO's basement evolved into the computer-based cryptanalysis that protects national security today. Every encrypted message, every cybersecurity protocol, every digital communication carries DNA from those mathematical breakthroughs achieved with IBM punch cards and benzodrine tablets. But perhaps the most important lesson involves the power of unconventional thinking. Rochefort succeeded because he ignored bureaucratic protocol. He wore smoking jackets instead of regulation uniforms. He trusted mathematical intuition over political safety. He empowered brilliant misfits like Thomas Dyer and Agnes Driscoll to pursue impossible solutions to unsolvable problems. His basement dungeon produced miracles precisely because it operated outside normal military constraints. In our current age of artificial intelligence and quantum computing, we still need basement geniuses willing to challenge impossible odds. We need leaders brave enough to trust unconventional solutions. We need the intellectual courage to believe that any code can be broken, any pattern can be detected, any enemy can be defeated, if we're willing to think differently enough. The burning carriers at Midway remind us that wars are won not just by superior firepower, but by superior intelligence. The cryptographers who cracked JN-25 saved American democracy using nothing more than mathematical brilliance, stubborn determination, and coffee-fueled obsession with impossible puzzles. Their victory echoes through history, a testament to the power of human ingenuity over seemingly insurmountable odds. In a basement at Pearl Harbor, eccentric geniuses change the world, ready to discover more incredible stories of World War II's hidden heroes. Subscribe now and join us as we uncover the secret operations, brilliant minds, and decisive moments that shaped our world. Because history's greatest victories often come from the most unexpected places and the most unconventional heroes. The morning mist clings to Saipan's coral beaches like a funeral shroud. June 15th, 1944. Lieutenant Hiroshi Nakamura crouches in his concrete bunker, 30 feet above the killing zone he's spent months preparing. His machine gun nest commands perfect fields of fire across the approaches. 3 years of Pacific War have taught him the rhythm of American amphibious assaults. Landing craft grinding against coral reefs, soldiers wading through chest-deep water, dying in the shallows under devastating fire from positions exactly like his. But something moves wrong in the morning haze beyond the reef. Shapes too large, too angular, advancing with mechanical precision through water that should stop any vehicle dead. Nakamura adjusts his field glasses, and his stomach tightens into a knot of disbelief. These are not landing craft. These are tanks, massive, boxy machines with tracks churning through 3 feet of Pacific water like some impossible fever dream. Their 75mm cannons already traversing toward his position with predatory intent. Impossible, he whispers in Japanese, his voice barely audible over the thunder of distant battleships. Tanks cannot swim. Yet there they are, dozens of mechanical beasts emerging from the sea itself, their engines growling like primordial creatures crawling from the deep. Behind them, conventional landing craft discharge thousands more Marines, but now they advance behind a moving wall of armor that Japanese planners never anticipated, never imagined, never prepared for. The first blast from an amphibious tank's cannon tears a chunk from Nakamura's bunker, showering him with concrete dust and the sudden, terrifying realization that everything he's been told about holding Americans at the waterline has just become obsolete. How did machines that shouldn't exist rewrite the rules of warfare in a single morning? And why did the peaceful inventor who created them never imagine they would bring an empire to its knees? You have to understand. This revolution began not in some top-secret military laboratory, but in the humid workshops of Lakeland, Florida, where a millionaire engineer named Donald Roebling was trying to save lives, not take them. September 1935. The most devastating hurricane in Florida's history has just torn through the Keys, leaving over 400 people dead and thousands more stranded in a hellscape of flooded roads, debris fields, and shallow water that conventional rescue vehicles simply cannot traverse. Donald Roebling, heir to a bridge-building empire, stares at newspaper photos of the destruction and sees a problem that genius can solve. His hands, already stained with grease and metal filings, sketch the first designs for what he calls simply the Alligator, a tracked vehicle that can swim like a boat but climb like a tank. In his private workshop, surrounded by prototype engines and aluminum hull sections, Roebling has no idea he's designing the machine that will transform warfare itself. Meanwhile, 6,000 miles across the Pacific, Imperial Japanese strategists are perfecting what they believe to be the ultimate island defense doctrine. The ocean itself will protect Japan's expanding empire. Enemy troops must come ashore in vulnerable boats, wade through deadly surf, establish footholds while exposed to devastating fire from prepared positions carved into coral and volcanic rock. Admiral Keiji Shibazaki embodies this confidence when he's posted to defend Tarawa Atoll in 1943. A veteran naval officer with decades of experience, he surveys the coral barriers extending hundreds of yards from shore and makes a boast that will echo through history. It would take 1 million men 100 years to conquer Tarawa. His defensive preparations are masterful, interlocking fields of fire, concrete bunkers that can withstand battleship bombardment, every approach covered by machine guns and artillery. But like every Japanese commander in the Pacific, Shibazaki's strategy depends on one unshakable assumption. American forces will follow predictable patterns, arriving in conventional landing craft that must discharge their human cargo in shallow water. But in Florida, Roebling's workshop has become something far more significant than a rich man's hobby. Life magazine features his amphibious alligator in 1940, showing photographs of the strange tracked machine crawling through swampland with rescue workers aboard. Marine Corps officers at Quantico study these images with growing excitement. They're not thinking about hurricane rescue. They're envisioning beaches bristling with Japanese guns. By 1942, Roebling's peaceful invention has been militarized into the LVT, Landing Vehicle Tracked. American factories in Detroit and Cleveland retool assembly lines to produce not dozens, but thousands of these amphibious machines. Each iteration grows larger, more heavily armored, more powerful. The original civilian rescue vehicle that could barely carry a dozen people evolves into the LVT-4, a 40-ton monster capable of transporting 24 fully equipped Marines from ship to shore, then continuing inland with the firepower of a medium tank. The engineering challenges are staggering. How do you waterproof a vehicle that must operate in salt water, then immediately function on land? How do you design tracks that provide both marine propulsion and terrestrial traction? How do you mount weapons that can engage targets both above and below the waterline? But the real breakthrough isn't technological, it's tactical. Previous amphibious assaults had followed predictable patterns: naval bombardment, waves of landing craft, the slow, dangerous process of getting heavy equipment ashore. The LVT eliminates the most vulnerable phase entirely, that deadly transition from sea to land where so many Americans had died. Colonel David Shoup, hero of Tarawa, grasps the implications immediately. Standing before maps of coral atolls at Marine headquarters in Hawaii, he makes a prediction that will prove prophetic. Without LVTs, there is no operation. With them, we can put armor on any beach in the Pacific. Japanese intelligence services detect unusual activity around American LVT formations, but their analysts cannot grasp the tactical implications. They have no comparable vehicles in their own inventory. They cannot imagine how tracked vehicles might function in saltwater. This intelligence gap will prove fatal. Because 700 miles away, Admiral Shibazaki continues refining his defensive plans, confident that coral reefs and ocean barriers will channel American forces into predetermined killing zones. He has no idea that those barriers are about to become highways. 5:45 a.m., June 15, 1944. The USS Tennessee's 16-inch guns speak first, their thunder rolling across 30 miles of Pacific water before erupting in towering geysers of coral and concrete. Within minutes, 7 battleships, 11 cruisers, and 26 destroyers join the barrage, transforming the pre-dawn darkness into a hellscape of flame and flying debris. Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito feels each impact like a physical blow from his command bunker deep beneath Mount Tapochau. But his engineers have anticipated this overwhelming firepower. The truly critical positions aren't visible at all. They lie hidden in natural caves, enlarged and reinforced with concrete, connected by tunnels that allow defenders to move unseen between positions. 15 miles offshore, Sergeant Jimmy Martinez runs final equipment checks on his LVT-4, briefing his crew on their mission: carry 24 Marines of the 2nd Division directly to Red Beach 1, then provide fire support as they advance inland. Unlike Higgins boat operators who discharge troops at the reef edge and immediately withdraw, Martinez will take his alligator all the way to shore and beyond. "Remember," Martinez tells his crew, his voice steady despite the thunder of naval bombardment, "we're not just a taxi service anymore. We're the first tanks on the beach, and every Marine behind us is counting on our gun to keep them alive." At 7 a.m., the guns fall silent. In the sudden quiet, broken only by waves against coral, American landing craft begin their final approach. But unlike every previous amphibious assault in Pacific War history, the first vehicles to hit Saipan's beaches won't be carrying helpless troops wading through surf. 8:00 a.m. Through the acrid smoke of naval bombardment, the first shapes emerge from morning haze like mechanical sea monsters breaking the surface of an alien world. Lieutenant Nakamura, still crouched in his cliffside bunker, watches in growing disbelief as tracked vehicles churn directly through the coral reef that was supposed to stop American armor dead in its tracks. Martinez's LVT-4 plows through 3 feet of water at nearly 8 mph. Its specially designed tracks providing propulsion while its 75mm cannon swivels toward Japanese positions. Behind Martinez, a line of amphibious tanks stretches back to the horizon, each carrying its deadly cargo of Marines and heavy weapons directly from ship to shore without pause or vulnerability. "Impossible," Nakamura whispers, his fingers trembling as he adjusts his machine gun's elevation. "Tanks cannot swim." But there they are, 40 tons of American engineering prowess proving that the ocean is no longer Japan's ally. As Martinez's LVT approaches the beach, his gunner identifies a concrete pillbox that survived naval bombardment and is already traversing a machine gun toward the landing zone. The 75mm cannon fires. The pillbox disappears in a cloud of concrete dust and twisted steel. Across the 4-mile landing front, similar scenes play out as nearly 700 LVTs deliver their human cargo directly onto Saipan's beaches. Unlike predictable waves of Higgins boats that Japanese defenders had learned to target, these armored vehicles arrive in a continuous stream, each capable of independent action while providing mutual support to neighbors. Private First Class Robert Chen, riding in Martinez's LVT, feels the tracks bite into coral sand as they make the transition from sea to land. "Holy cow, Sarge," he shouts over engine noise. "We just drove a tank out of the ocean." For 3 years, American amphibious doctrine had accepted massive casualties as the inevitable price of establishing beachheads against fortified positions. At Tarawa, nearly 1,000 Marines died in 76 hours, most while wading through shallows under devastating fire from positions exactly like those now facing them on Saipan. But the LVTs have eliminated the most vulnerable phase of assault. Japanese defensive fire, carefully pre-registered on the waterline where previous American assaults had been most exposed, now strikes empty water. The real targets are already inland, their armor shrugging off small arms fire, while their cannons systematically reduce positions that took months to construct. Colonel Takeshi Yamamoto, commanding the 136th Infantry Regiment responsible for defending southern beaches, frantically radios his superiors. "Enemy tanks are coming directly from the sea. Repeat, enemy tanks are coming from the sea. Our beach obstacles are useless. They are driving over the coral reef." But even as Yamamoto speaks, he realizes this is more than tactical surprise. American engineers have fundamentally solved the central problem of amphibious warfare: how to deliver heavy weapons and armor to hostile shores quickly enough to exploit the shock of initial assault. Within 90 minutes of first landing, over 8,000 American troops are ashore with full armor support, advancing against positions designed to defeat an entirely different kind of attack. Japan's 3-year investment in coral reef defenses has become worthless in less than 2 hours. By 10 a.m., Lieutenant General Saito realizes that every assumption underlying his defensive strategy has been wrong. Radio reports paint a nightmare scenario: American armor already 2 miles inland, Japanese beach defenses collapsing faster than reserves can respond, Americans landing supplies and reinforcements at rates that make previous assaults look like reconnaissance probes. "Launch the counterattack now," Saito orders Colonel Yamamoto. "Drive them back into the sea before they consolidate." What follows is one of the largest tank battles in Pacific warfare history, though the odds are catastrophically lopsided. Japan's 9th Tank Regiment, equipped with lightweight Type 95 Heigo tanks designed for infantry support in China, charges across Saipan's sugarcane fields with desperate courage and obsolete equipment. Martinez watches through his periscope as the first Japanese tanks emerge from coconut palms. "Target's 11 o'clock, his gunner calls. "Range 800 yards. The 75mm cannon fires. The lead Heigo simply disintegrates, its thin armor no match for weapons designed to knock out German Panthers in Normandy. In less than 20 minutes, 24 Japanese tanks become burning scrap metal scattered across cane fields. The age of amphibious tank warfare has arrived, and the Japanese Empire is learning what that means. Lieutenant Hiroshi Nakamura survived the Battle of Saipan, one of fewer than 1,000 Japanese defenders to live through what became a 3-week slaughter. In his post-war memoirs, published in 1970, he wrote words that capture the psychological earthquake of that morning. "We prepared for the enemy we knew, but America brought us a war we could never have imagined. They turned our greatest natural advantage, the ocean itself, into their highway to victory." The numbers tell the story of transformation that goes far beyond individual battles. Before Saipan, American forces required an average of 2 weeks to establish secure beachheads on defended islands. After Saipan, that timeline collapsed to days or even hours. The LVTs had eliminated the fundamental vulnerability that had constrained American offensive operations since Pearl Harbor. But the real revolution wasn't just tactical, it was strategic. For the first time since the war began, American forces had captured territory that brought Japanese cities within range of sustained bombing. B-29. Superfortresses, already being assembled on rapidly constructed airfields, would soon carry the war directly to Japan's industrial heartland. Donald Roebling, the peaceful inventor whose hurricane rescue vehicle had started this chain reaction, spent the rest of his life grappling with the unintended consequences of innovation. In a 1954 interview, he reflected, "I designed the alligator to save lives in Florida swamps. I never imagined it would help end a war on the other side of the world." Sergeant Martinez returned to Texas after the war, keeping a photograph of his LVT-4 on his workshop wall for the rest of his life. "People ask me what won the war," he would tell his grandchildren, "and I tell them it wasn't any one thing. But I'll say this, the day we learned to drive tanks out of the ocean was the day Japan lost the Pacific." The strategic implications extended far beyond World War II. Modern amphibious assault vehicles trace their lineage directly back to those first LVTs that emerged from Saipan's surf. From today's Marine Corps assault amphibious vehicles to advanced hovercraft and tilt-rotor aircraft, the principle remains the same. Eliminate the vulnerable transition between sea and land that had constrained military operations for centuries. Today, The coral reefs around Saipan still bear scars from that morning in June 1944, when American amphibious tanks first demonstrated that the age of island fortress warfare was over. But the real monument to their achievement lies not in physical evidence of battle, but in the strategic reality they created: the transformation of the world's largest ocean from Japan's protective moat into America's highway to victory. It was here, on these shores, that an empire realized the war was already lost the moment American armor crawled directly out of the sea. Want to discover more untold stories of technological breakthroughs that changed history? Subscribe now and hit the notification bell, because the most decisive battles are often won by innovations nobody saw coming.